Hey, welcome. We're live. Having a couple technical issues there, but we're live. We're good. For some reason it said 7:10, but it was supposed to be 7 p.m. But here we are. We're 7:02 actually. Got a little bit of a new setup tonight. I want to ask your advice later on in the show, which way you like better. But definitely want to welcome you to the show. So much is happening today. I felt like 50 Cent today. On my birthday. Everyone thinks it's my birthday because of what I posted up today. It felt like that today. Just seeing Michael Proctor suspended with pay. And then this other stuff that came out. I got the guys that you want to hear. No, you don't want to listen to me tonight. You don't. You might. I mean, you might want to hear from me, but I got two guys you want to hear even more tonight. Maybe a few other people too. Let's bring up the first one. He's a retired FBI agent. This is the first time on the show. All this years doing the show, I've had a U.S. senator on the show, 4 Congress reps. I've never had a retired FBI agent on the show. I had one former DEA, Sean McDonough, friend of the show, been on the show a bunch of times. This is the first time I'll ever have a retired FBI agent. He was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation from 1995 to 2021. He's done a lot of jobs there. He was a special agent. He was on the hostage rescue team. He's also seems like a smart guy. He's a communicator too, I think. He was the chief of operations for the Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems. This was like a new thing, and he was the head of it. So got a lot of experience in law enforcement. I saw him on another show talking about the Karen Reed, and I just wanted to get him up here tonight to talk about Karen Reed, maybe some other stuff too. Who knows? We could probably talk to him all night. We just had a little green room backstage with him and attorney Mark Betterow, who's also in the green room watching. They were quizzing each other on who they knew. I'm excited. Welcome to the show. Retired FBI agent. He's got a consulting company. He's going to tell us about that too. Robert D'Amico, welcome to the show tonight.
Thanks. Appreciate the invite.
Oh, very happy to have you tonight. This is the night too. This is pretty crazy day today. Everyone wanted a show since this afternoon.
Yeah, I was actually looking at travel last night, and I was seeing the link for this, and it like a bunch of people thought it was last night, and they're like, oh, I'm like, wow, people are already on anticipating the show, so appreciate that. But I think it's a good day to have it on Monday after what happened during the day today.
And tell us about yourself, because like you said, you also served the U.S. military too, didn't you?
Yeah. So enlisted in the Marines right out of high school. Went to boot camp and then to college. Graduated college, went in the Marine Corps active duty as an officer. Got through with that, and then ended up getting on the FBI in 1995. First office in Miami, did fugitives, and ended up doing as I was talking in the green room before, a couple years undercover against a mob. The guy they wrote Sopranos about, Vinnie Ocean, went against him, ran a nightclub, and lived on a yacht in Miami. So it wasn't a bad first gig in the Bureau. But then I made the hostage rescue team in 1999, was up there for almost 19 years. And 9/11 happened, so we started doing a lot of deployments overseas. So I got a lot of overseas time, about half a dozen deployments Iraq, about 4.5 years in Afghanistan, Africa, and everywhere else. Did liaison to the Joint Special Operations Command. A lot of I always say, I was had a Forrest Gump career where I just kind of fell into things that were happening on the big stage, so to speak, and then end up in Kabul, Afghanistan, 2018 to 2020. Ran ops, all the FBI ops in Afghanistan just before the drawdown, during a bunch of hostage negotiations and stuff. Came back and then ran the counter drone unit for the FBI before I retired and went in the private sector. Did that for a little bit and then opened my company, Sierra One Consulting, and about 1.5 years now.
And you've been speaking, I saw you on another show about the Karen Reed case. What do you think about the police work in this case itself?
So, we'll get into it. It's just one of those things where as an FBI agent, like you're just so ingrained in doing the right thing the right way, no matter what. And we'll talk about a little bit. One of the ops I did was arresting a pirate over in Somalia, chased him around Africa for 8 weeks, finally caught him back in Somalia after he went around the continent. And even there, we took like such precautions with the evidence that it wasn't funny, because I knew at one point I was going to have to sit in court and testify that the evidence I had that I'm presenting, that the FBI and the prosecutors presenting in trial, since I got it, no one had been able to touch it since that time. I mean, and then when you look at a trial like this and you hear about, and we'll talk about it, about the scene not being secured and saying, hey, come back later. If you guys find anything after, just, bring it in. The Massachusetts troopers policy of not having to have an evidence log until it's into the final stage, like the final evidence room. I just don't know how that happens in a modern law enforcement agency. So, I mean, we'll talk about it, but I mean, those are the basics. Like when you find a piece of evidence, till the day it goes in court, you have to be able to say who had the ability to touch this and influence it until you're presenting it to the jury. So I don't understand how some of that obviously was put in there. Again, you're weighing the jury's sense of like how much weight they give it based on that. But the fact that they don't even have a policy on that is just unbelievable to me.
And Michael Proctor, the state police lead investigator. I'm still calling him the lead investigator. They try to change it to like case supervisor. He got fired today. Like basically, I mean, he hasn't been totally fired.
He wasn't fired. He was
with
first relieved of duties, and then he today was suspended without pay. So it's a union. I mean, they have a union up there. So the FBI doesn't have unions in their special agent. But as a union, you're going to have to go through certain wickets, to make sure that they do it right. Because if you're going to fire someone, it has to be in accordance with everything that their, labor agreement abided by and got approved. So they're going through those wickets now. I don't doubt who will be fired. I mean, this is just the second stage in it, but I believe he will be.
What do you think a supervisor should get some crap on this?
Well, I think yes. Fired, not sure, but when your supervisor's on the text messages that he sent and doesn't counsel him, doesn't bring him in for formal counseling, doesn't correct it, I think you have to, again, as a leader in any organization, you have to be held to higher standards. So if you have a subordinate who's doing that, that's knowingly trashing of a person in the case and all these other things, and the words that he used, you have to do something. So I think the supervisor probably won't get fired, but I think either demoted or at least suspended without pay for a little while and brought back on.
Now the FBI got investigated a lot of the witnesses for the district attorney for the prosecution, and then the U.S. attorney dropped this TUI disclosure, 3,000 pages of documents that were sent to the prosecution and the defense. It seemed like the defense really used that information. Have you ever seen anything like that before? Like, does that normally happen where the FBI gets it, all their documents get dumped by the U.S. attorney to help a defense team? Have you ever seen that before in a criminal case?
I haven't. I mean, it was really surprising that it happened. But when you look at the totality of everything, and there's not, like, even the assistant U.S. attorney that brought this up and everything going on with there's some politics in that too, based on so-and-so's wife worked for so-and-so. So there are some backstories to that, but if the FBI is asked to investigate, I've never seen where they just drop 3,000 documents that are more supportive to the defense. I mean, it's just what we found. The FBI found. So they're not going to hide it from anyone. They're going to say, "Hey, this is up." I don't know what the FBI is investigating. It could have started with the civil rights type of thing, and then it expounded to other things. We will only see what the FBI came up with if they file charges and stuff. So, I mean, the FBI is pretty tight-lipped on things. I remember during the Robert Hansen investigation, I was at the hostage rescue team, and we have our own helicopter, so we have all our own pilots down there. And one of the lead pilots, his wife was an agent, and the morning Robert Hansen was arrested and walked, when they did the perp walk with him, he looked at the TV and he's like, "Holy cow, that's my wife. I didn't even know she was working on that case." So here it is where, two agents who have the same clearances, one's working on something very sensitive for 2 years, never told her husband she was working on this case. He only found out by the news. So, like I said, FBI can be pretty tight-lipped on what they're working. But the charges, if they come up with them, will explain it all if they do.
And what do you think they're doing like during this case while this case is going on? Do you think that if they're building a case, it's helping them? Like, what do you think
They're
their
paying
role is?
attention. Like they're definitely paying attention to, because everything that everyone says on the stand, if they find out that it's like a witness is actually lying on the stand based on other information they have, that's perjury. So that could go in there too. So they're definitely paying attention. They're seeing how it fits into the case if they have it, depending on who it is, what it is. So I like I said, they're paying attention. Not sure, how many agents are involved in this investigation, but they're looking.
Now, you seem kind of measured, like, even weighing even the other side, what they're saying, versus Jennifer Coffindaffer, who is very controversial. She's got the FBI thing in her name. This was like the number one question when I announced that you were coming on. Everyone's like, is it Jennifer Coffindaffer? And if it's not, can you ask him about Jennifer Coffindaffer? Do you know do you know her? Like, what do you think about her expertise, like going as an FBI agent, being so controversial?
I don't know her personally. I mean, she was an FBI agent. I just find that so many people they don't dig. And I've talked to other FBI agents about this case, some of them from Boston and everything else. And some of it, like whenever you say, "Well, I believe it because so-and-so is telling me," and he's a cop, like I'm not one of those guys. I'm one of those people that, one, no matter what, the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt is on the prosecution. And that is, as an agent, I always looked at, that's my job. Like if I can't prove it past that, I would rather have a guilty person on the street than an innocent person in jail. That's just the way I look at things. And I've been all over the world where I've seen kangaroo courts and the police being the enemy, that they just rule things. And that's not what we want here.
I love that you said that. You sound like Attorney Betterow. The burden of proof.
What's funny
Do you
is,
think the burden of proof has been met in this case?
watch the I'm watching the Apple TV series Presumed Innocent, and it's a pretty compelling type story type of thing. But in the beginning of it, the guy who's accused later on of a murder is a prosecutor, and he talks about, like, if you just think she's guilty, if you just maybe think that you have to find her innocent. It's one of those things that it's the way the American justice system is. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, and that is on the prosecution. And if anyone's mad at this case, and I get it, it is like throwing gas on a fire on both sides, that she did it or she didn't do it. But if you just look at it, who do I blame the most? I blame the investigators who did such a poor job in investigation that they didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that their fellow cop was hit by this person. The things that they did led that jury, I think, to have questions about the evidence. And even if you don't believe the controversy that he was beat up in the house and brought out and thrown on the lawn type of thing, and we'll just a quick summary of that. Even if you don't believe that, I don't believe that the evidence provided in such a way that it's beyond a reasonable doubt she did it. So you have to acquit. Like in my mind, the jury has to do that because the case was horrible. And I feel bad for the prosecutor looking at the horrible investigation, having to go to court with it. Because he's handed that. He's not part of the investigation, especially in the early days, where he can dictate things and how they're done. So I really fault the cops for doing just a bad investigation.
I do want to bring Attorney Betterow up now. Attorney Betterow,
Hi.
this is a big day today with what's going on. You've been on like every show. I'm sure you were on RKO today, right? On one of those shows.
Yeah.
And you've been on like 3 other shows. What do you have to say about today?
It's such a crazy day that what you thought would be the big story of the day, which is Proctor getting pushed down the rung one step closer to termination, not quite there, but close to it, became kind of a back page story in light of this motion that was filed today, which is just stunning. I mean, I don't know any lawyer or anyone who is involved in trials and litigation who's ever heard of a situation where less than a week after a hung jury, a motion was filed which alleges that 25% of the jury in the span of a day and a half contacted, separate and apart from each other, 2 defense lawyers to say, actually, we acquitted on a murder count and another one. Shouldn't say 3 jurors. I mean, 2 of them were kind of through intermediaries. It's not technically accurate, but nevertheless, the allegations are there, and that's just something you'll never hear that again. And you take a case like this, which before this happened was already about as crazy as it gets, and now it's just moved into a new stratosphere of bonkers. Because I mean, who has ever seen a motion filed in which a hung jury was declared and jurors are calling the defense and saying, wait a minute, that's not what happened. And the reality is the reason this probably even became a thing was because certain rabble rousers on Twitter were making stories up about things they clearly didn't know. And we kept saying, until you hear from jurors, you don't know what goes on in the jury room. People want to know. That's natural. It's all part of the speculation. But you had some of the Twitter rabble rousers and troublemakers making up stories that they clearly had no basis to know, saying that this was essentially a conviction hanging by a thread. You know, they had 2 people. And what you saw, the way I described it to you last week, as it was kind of an integrity test for useful idiots, because look at the people who pounced on this and went with it. The usual suspects. It made its way to former editors of the Boston Globe. It made its way to court TV. It became shameful, and it just became a fact, if you will, that this was probably a 10-2 conviction. And you have to think that that's probably what led to jurors who finally had access to news and media. God knows what they thought, what else they learned. But, you know, it's one thing to know or believe that somebody's making something up. Like in this case, we think a lot of things are made up, but you don't know because you weren't there. How could you possibly know? It's another thing altogether if you're somebody like a juror who knows what happened in the room, knows what you talked about, knows what you agreed or didn't agree, and to see people online spouting nonsense about what happened in the room. And you just have to wonder if that's what led to these kinds of filings. So there's so much criticism to go around here. And I just enjoyed listening to what you guys were talking about, just in terms of blaming the investigators. And it's fascinating because when you're a seasoned FBI agent and a trained investigator, who do you blame? You blame the investigators who don't do their job. When you're a former prosecutor and a lawyer and you look at the same thing and you say, who do I blame the most? Michael Morrissey. I blame the lawyer who ultimately, in my view, had the power to say, when you bring me a real case, come in. But I think it's fascinating when you hear from real investigators with real background and real skills to tell you how poor some of the investigation was on this case. I think that's very telling, and it's a different voice, and it should carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I love having both of you here. And I blame them all, the lawyers and the cops,
Plenty of
and,
blame
you
to
know,
go
the
around.
DA.
I,
Yeah,
I
I think.
really blame for overcharging on the second degree murder case.
Oh.
That like,
Embarrassing.
and I think if they had charged correctly, they might have got a plea. Like one of those, like depending on certain things, they definitely would have looked at things differently if they'd been charged right. But second degree murder, like
Yeah.
like did she plan this the day before? Like even if you look at like they had an argument that evening and I'm just saying this hypothetically, and she backed up and hit him, that's still not second degree murder. Like if like a couple days beforehand you had her texting or like Google searching like how to hit somebody in reverse and kill them a day before, then you can start looking at intent. But there's nothing in even what they presented that I think would lead to second degree murder. So I just don't even understand that a charge unless
Well, I think that was an
they thought they were
upcharge
going to
too,
overcharge and she would like, oh, I'll
That's
plead
it.
to something less.
because they started out with a lower charge, which
Yeah. Well,
go along with the plea bargain. That's when they upcharged her.
and they're
Like, that's-
vindictive, and that's
Yeah.
evidence of being
Yeah.
vindictive. But they also violated the first rule of trying a case as a prosecutor, and rule number one is you have to be credible. So I agree entirely. I don't know that she would have pled guilty. I tend to think not, but that's neither here nor there. But the key point is you have to be credible. You have to, you know, you're the prosecutor, you wear the white hat, you need the jury to trust you that I don't, you know, bring charges without having the evidence to do so. And when they come in with a murder case where she's alleged to have, you know, backed into him deliberately at by the way, right in front of a house where everyone knew she was coming over with him. This was like, you know, they were invited there. They knew there were people in the house. It's a residential area. There's people potentially across the street. You heard testimony from other witnesses who were right there. The Nagel kid, Ryan, whoever, the other kids in the car. And so they overtry this. They look silly. And then it also, what else does it lead them to do? To call probably 25 witnesses too many. You know, you heard about nonsense arguments in Aruba, because that never happens, right? When couples go on vacation and maybe drink a little too much and you see things that you think you see and there's arguments. And they had to call all of those witnesses. It also demonstrated something the DA probably shouldn't have, which is that, you know, Michael Proctor couldn't be bothered to go inside 34 Fairview or look right in front of him to where there could be evidence of a crime. But, you know, I'll travel 50 miles to interview two young women about an argument in Aruba right away, because that's important. Those text messages, all that stuff, it's all nonsense. The idea
what's funny was I thought like they took her voicemails like as like, hey, this is proof she like, but then again, if you just hit somebody, are you going to call and then threaten him and with all this other stuff? So
Nope.
like
It's
I always
crazy.
turn that around saying like, well, that's to me, that's crazy. Like if you just hit the guy or even if you backed into him, and that's the other thing, people go out and try to back up at 25 miles an hour. It is not easy. And to do it in a snowstorm is definitely like wait, and then to hit a specific target. I backed up at 70 miles an hour and thought like I was doing a driving course. I thought my instructor was going to freak out because it's just unbelievable when you start backing up. Most people back up at 5 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. 24 is incredibly fast. And then to actually hit a person at that.
Wow.
So it's one of those things that even their evidence that they were saying, I looked at, you know, again, I have experience in it and I look at it and say, that's just nuts to believe. But her phone calls where she's threatening them, where she's mad at them, to me, well, if you just knowingly backed into somebody, even if you didn't know you hit and killed him, if he was laying there, are you going to call how many times and threaten him and call him all kinds of names? I don't think so. So it's one of those things where their evidence, I'm like, I look at it the other way around.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do too.
You'd be calling it sweet nothings, honey. Where are you, honey? Yeah.
I
I mean,
love
if you were trying to
I
cover it up.
I didn't mean to fight with you. You were right. Like you would just like pin it on the whole other way.
You. That's what a liar would do.
Also, I mean, you know,
I want to mention too, Mark, that think you said earlier, 10-2, 10-2. Because I just want to remind people, that other side knew that was false. We knew it was false. We actually got a tip off. We got a weird tip off, and it basically predicted everything that just happened. And I read it once on the show, and I said, this is not something I can confirm. I've tried to confirm. I can't confirm it, but I think it's credible. I read it one time. We didn't even tweet about it. Mark, you were it was like after the show was over. I don't even know if you heard it. But like, that's the difference between us and them. Like, we didn't run on that like it was true, even though it looks like it turned out to be true, because it was like a rumor. And they put 10-2, and they ran like it was a fact. And we knew it wasn't a fact.
Okay, well, but I mean, this whole thing is so misguided. And to me, the line in the sand when a real prosecutor would take a deep breath, take inventory of what they're doing, get philosophical and say, I don't think we can do this anymore unless we satisfy a few things, is, you were talking about the TUI disclosures, and you get these 3,000 pages that the U.S. attorney turns over. And I agree, obviously, they're going to give that to both sides. They're never going to give it just to the defense. They would never do that. It's not how they work, even if they want the defense to use it and prevail. But putting that all aside, I mean, imagine being the people in the DA's office who you start looking through the documents and you see that they hired, these engineers and those who have just, they're the number one reconstruction firm probably in the world. Okay. If they're making stuff for the military and the NHL and all that stuff, whatever, these guys are clearly, and they give you a report and it says that the physics don't support your theory. Okay. It's not opinion. We're not trying to ruin your day and ruin your case. It's science. Okay. And it doesn't work. And at a minimum, if you're the prosecutor, how do you not at least say, let's take that report and go and search for, quote unquote, their competitor, whoever that is. There's got to be other credentialed people like that. Maybe not to their level, but there's got to be people. Take it to them and see what they say. Odds are they're going to say, you know what? We kind of agree because it's science. And if they don't agree, then you say, okay, that's our expert, and maybe we'll try to have a battle of the experts, which is never usually a good thing for the prosecutor because the burden of proof, but it's something. And they don't do any of that. Instead, what they do is say, we've got this state trooper who took a 2-hour course in accident reconstruction, and we'll go with that. And they said that was okay. They green lighted that scenario. And in the process, they ruined that man's career. They humiliated him. They humiliated the entire agency. They probably gave life to any defendant who's been convicted as a result of a state police accident reconstruction person in the last however many years. And they look at you and with a straight face say, we'll do it again. And you just sit there and say, unless you're going to get a real expert, unless you're going to answer these difficult questions, how can you do this? They knew about Proctor. They knew about it and said, this is okay.
Yeah.
It's
and
insane.
the thing is, like, what's like the expert witnesses hired by the FBI to look at it. So even when you look at expert witnesses, you can always almost find one, that's going to agree with you type of thing.
Right.
But to throw on third-party experts that weren't even hired by the defense, you have to have such strong counter experts to them. And you put, like you said, you put on a guy who, and I'm sorry, but he was humiliated on the stand. It was painful to watch. And like you said, I feel sorry for him, but also all the cases that he's been now an expert witness in, like, those lawyers are paying attention. But to get over a third-party expert witness as good as they had that said it wasn't from a car, collision, you have to have such a preponderance over that, and they came nowhere again. So it's one of those things I don't understand what their mentality was. And then knowing what you had to get over with Proctor with his text messages and that investigation. And have you ever heard of okay, we didn't find what we needed to, but everyone drive by the crime scene, and if you guys find something in the next weeks, just go ahead and bring it in. Like,
Insane.
what?
chief of
I mean,
police, yeah.
the red Solo cups were bad enough, but I can look at it and say, okay, there's somewhat of an attempt there.
Taillight's worse.
Taillight's worse.
Yep.
The first guy in the scene finds tons of small taillights, and then the guy later, like, you know, I don't know how long later it was. It wasn't a while. He finds huge pieces of taillights, but that the guy who found little pieces of taillights and it doesn't add up in the videos. You have to overcome the videos, and they never even disclose that they're reversed images. Like, was that on purpose, or were they thinking they're not going to notice this?
They also got that in the middle of trial. They got that video apparently from the Canton police in the middle of trial. And, you know, just to go back to the taillight real quickly, it's bad enough when you hear, like, we just drove by and each day a little more. I mean, to me, again, it's like the power of God. It rose and came out of the snow and the sun was shining on it. That's all bad enough. But then you realize, look at the people who found the missing taillight. Okay, number one is Michael Proctor, who is as corrupt and disgraced. I mean, you can't credit anything with him. His partner, Buchanan, he's the supervisor that you were talking about earlier. He liked these messages. He didn't, and he wants to be, you know, one of the bros. That's the way he is. He's cocky, he's sitting there leaning on the, you saw the way he testified, his body language. But even beyond that, he, you know, he's the guy in the Sally Port who everything got screwed up. And with the inverted video, he's tainted too. And Proctor is his guy. You know that. And then the other one is, you know, Chief Berkowitz, who, you know, apparently saw one from 30
feet. He drove by and saw something.
We call Chief Wiggum around here.
Yeah. Like, you know, recused from the investigation, but he drove by and let me look too.
3 people who found taillight, but not the trained CERT people. Okay. Not, you know, as bad as the original Canton guys were. I get it. They didn't find anything. But these 3 guys are telling you that, you know, somebody put a video online, and I don't know how accurate or not it is because I didn't read it or look at it that carefully. But, you know, there's a lot of online sleuthing, as you know, that goes on, and people have an amazing amount of time and ability to put this together. But when Proctor said this is kind of the reconstructed taillight based on the pieces that we found, somebody put it together and found that all the pieces that were found by Proctor went in one exact section, and all the pieces found by Buchanan went in one section. And if that's the case, that's sketchy, because what are the odds that they would literally just randomly find the right pieces? Or again, to me, it's like we joked about months ago, like Odd Job dropping the golf ball.
When you look at the crime scene, like, one, I look at it as like, hey, a fellow police officer is killed. You're going to bring in every resource, and it's going to be more than your average citizen's killed. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is.
It's true.
It should be. Like, you know, hey, a brother was killed. Like, everything we need is going to come in here. And they cleared that crime scene quicker than I clean my house on a Saturday. Like, are you kidding me? If the Bureau was there and you had snow, you would have it all tented off. You would have heaters melting everything down. It would be like in the pirate case, we flew an entire ERT team to Djibouti to process a boat that we towed and then sailed for 3 days from the middle of the Red Sea back to Djibouti to do a proper crime scene. Like, that's the extent that you should go to really, like, for if you're looking for justice, to prosecute a crime scene. And when you're done, it is done. Like, there's no driving by 3 days later and finding a piece of, you know, tail light type of thing. So I don't get, like, when you look at it and say, well, we're doing this for a fellow cop brother, but we're going to take every wrong turn in the world in prosecuting a crime scene. I just am floored at it. I'm angered by it to a point where, that's who's the fault. Like, when you start looking at fault, and I don't blame like, you know, the O'Keefe's brother talking out and stuff like that. They want to believe things. They want to believe the story that the prosecutor and everyone else is giving them. And they want the person that they've been told, and they start believing the story. I blame the police for doing such a bad, even if they're not part of, quote, the corruption. Like if the conspiracy that they talk about happened, and Proctor's just told, like, hey, like make it look like she did it. All these other cops that come in here that did things the wrong way, how do you allow that to happen? It's like you drive a truck through their investigation.
Let's talk about that, because let's talk about what comes next. Today. Well, I mean, what is going to happen? What should happen, Mark?
Well,
Like you saw what happened in court today.
This
What
is
was
a
filed.
mess. So they're not really allowed to talk to jurors. I've learned in Massachusetts, you know, which is different than in New York, where you just follow them around, and if you want to find them, you can, and whatever. So usually anytime you have an allegation of something happening in the jury room, number one, it rarely works, because, you know, jury deliberations are something that a court does not want to disturb and get involved in. But this is a very unique situation, because it's kind of working in backwards. It's the jurors who are reaching out on their own to report, you know, what they perceive to be something that's very wrong and could have an impact. And obviously, if you're talking about someone who they acquitted of murder, who the DA says, I'm going to try again for murder, that's a problem. So they file this motion, and the critical part of the motion is they don't have the evidence yet. It's all hearsay. It is, but they're asking for permission to basically contact the jurors. If you look through all the legal mumbo jumbo at the end, they're looking to acquire more evidence, which would naturally be affidavits from jurors, interviews with jurors. And, you know, if they get that and they can introduce evidence that's not contradicted, then putting aside the DA's response, which is going to be, you know, they didn't check off the slip. This is all regret after the fact. It's not credible. It's unreliable. Deliberations are sacrosanct, so let's not speculate. The judge, I think, is going to have no option, other than to grant a hearing if they get the evidence that they claim they're going to present. And the real wrinkle in this, to me, are two things. Number one, we said this in live time when this happened. I mean, not to sound prescient or anything, but when they were arguing over the verdict sheet the first time, if you remember, there was discussion, some other lawyers too. Andrea was one of them. I remember this very well. Andrea Burkhardt, who's really good appellate lawyer, that this verdict sheet potentially is going to lead to a problem, not just confusing the jury about what are they doing, but what if they hang on some counts? How are you going to know? And the judge's initial reaction was, you know, as you know, very aggressive and, almost like, don't you dare try to embarrass me, very standoffish, chastising. Then she yelled at Karen Reed for all that stuff, but she changed it so that they get the proper slip, apparently, that has the boxes to check. But he never does the one thing that you'd expect a judge to do when the jury sends a note, we're deadlocked, go back to work. Okay. They come back, we're deadlocked again, give them the charge, we're done. Okay. But she never did anything to either ask or make a determination or remind them that you've got to consider each charge. And when you say you're hung, are we talking on 1, 2, 3? And it was just presumed. And she should have done that, and she didn't. So she's kind of got a mess. The other problem that she potentially has, because she didn't do that, and because these allegations are now being made, what she did do was speak to the jurors alone right after, which doesn't mean she did anything wrong. Normally you would think it would be nothing more than, thank you for your service, I'm sorry, 2 months, I know you put all this effort into it. But this becomes a relevant issue if there's a hearing, because the DA is going to want to argue that the first opportunity the jurors had to complain, to say, wait a minute, I think there could be an issue, presumably the DA is going to want to have the judge and the jurors say that never came up. And the argument being, if they thought something wrong had happened, they would have said so. And that potentially makes her a witness. And of course, if some of the jurors do say we raised that issue, well, now you got a real scandal, because in that case, the judge should have notified the parties something's going on. So the defense, they're going to have Jackson and Yannetti testify, obviously, if this goes to a hearing, which is why they had the new lawyer, very distinguished lawyer, come in and write the motion. That's appropriate. But if the judge is potentially a witness and has to get cross-examined by Karen Reed's attorneys, and what if they don't believe the judge? What if they try to impeach her credibility for truthfulness? I'm not saying they would. What if they do, though? How can she sit over a second trial? So they may get two benefits out of this potentially. They may. So it's a long way to go, but if they
what
try,
about if the judge appeals against them? They could appeal it, right, to higher court on that to get it dismissed.
if she doesn't order a hearing or something, it's going to become part of the record and something they could raise. I mean, if they have credible allegations, suppose they end up saying, well, let's back up. This was big news today. 3 jurors apparently reached out, one of which Jackson has direct knowledge. I spoke to a juror who told me this. The other 2 went through an intermediary that went to Yannetti, whatever. Well, this was big news. So you might expect other jurors to come forward now and either confirm or dispel. And if they, suppose 9 more jurors say it's all true. Or alternatively, if it's not true, wouldn't you expect a juror to call the DA and say, that's not accurate? But who knows? But the bottom line is, I don't think you can just ignore this. And I saw some online commentary by lawyers and non-lawyers, including the former attorney general of the state, saying it's all hearsay and this is going nowhere. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? They're going to try to get the evidence to make the motion have what you need to get the hearing. They're very clear that we need permission to develop further evidence to see where this goes. So I thought Coakley's analysis was just a little simplistic for somebody as, intellectual and talented in terms of resume. I don't know if that was just, talking out of turn about something, but it's way too premature to just say, oh, this is all hearsay. Don't put any faith in this. If those jurors back up what is being said, how do you ignore this if there's potentially the possibility that a woman acquitted of murder could be retried for murder? That's about the most un-American thing that could ever happen in a court, ever.
What do you think, Rob?
Absolutely. Everything he talked about, and I think so many people have just gone to their corners, so to speak, like the former attorney general, that's hearsay, instead of really looking at it. And again, I'm reading some of the comments and stuff, and someone said, how did Rob and Jennifer go to the same FBI academy? But I think it's like thinking with a critical mind, where you look at things and just don't, trust me, when I first started looking at this case and I heard this conspiracy, I'm like, are you kidding? All right, I'm tired of conspiracies type of thing.
Right, exactly.
But then I started looking, and it came in at the witnesses and the whole butt dialing thing, of butt dialing back and forth 8 times.
Possible.
I get it, butt dial once, everyone's done that.
Yeah,
but
8
I
times.
Butt dialed, and then he butt dialed me back, and then he butt dialed me. I don't know exactly what happened. I no one does, except you're there. But I know those witnesses were lying. And it's why were they lying? And you have to look at it as, then if you think they're lying, then the credibility of everything they say type of thing. And I started believing, and someone said, oh, I can't believe Rob doesn't believe in this conspiracy. I actually believe in it. Normally I would be one, the case they presented, I think you just had to, even if you believe it or not, you have to go non-guilty. They did not present a case that supported her being found guilty of any of this.
Absolutely.
But I actually started believing the conspiracy when I started really looking at what the witnesses were saying compared to what the evidence was showing in the bad investigation.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that like you're just like, how can you just go to law enforcement or like the attorney general? Oh, that's hearsay. Instead of really looking at it critically and understanding that people are looking at your opinion and they're going to start weighing the evidence on you of your credibility just because you're going to your corner. And that's what I always say. You can't just go to, if you're a former cop, go into a law enforcement corner, because trust me, there's plenty of people who have been railroaded in this country. Like it's just one of those things. Like, get over it.
Absolutely.
God forbid they have to retry this case, because I still don't think it's going to happen for a lot of reasons. But if they do, what I really hope they do a little differently, just a slight modification when it comes time to like drop the hammer on this case. I really hope they lead with the ARCA stuff and basically say there's no car accident, or at least there's a strong reason not to believe it, and really connect the dots backwards and say, if there's no car accident, why are there 45 pieces of taillight here that could not have come from that impact? And if it didn't come from the impact, then human hands had to put them there. Whose hands? We've talked about this before. Well, Proctor, does that make sense? I don't know. Go to the videotape, go to the text messages. It makes perfect sense. He doesn't even work there anymore. What about his buddy Buchanan, the one who likes the messages, the one who's lying about the Sallyport video? Does that make sense? Do those sound like the kind of guys who might be in the Sallyport playing with the taillight? I don't know. Buchanan testified about the inverted video and then denied it was him going back and forth. It makes perfect sense. Well, what are they covering up? I don't know. Well, wait a minute. Go back to Proctor. This guy's a Boston cop. He's good. No worries. Oh, wait a minute. He lied about knowing all these people. Well, who are the people in the house? We don't know what they did, but Brian Albert and Brian Higgins butt dialed each other literally 1 minute apart, back and forth, 3 minutes before the Google search. Then they both got rid of their phones the same day, 1 day before the preservation order. And if you connect it that way, this is a joke.
When you look at like the electronic stuff, there's science in DNA that's really becoming like, if you're accused of a murder and your DNA is at the crime scene and it shouldn't be there, DNA, like you get to the percentages. Electronically, though, there is a big gap between absolute and I think so. Now, I work with a cyber company called Sentry Ops, and former NSA, former CIA, and a bunch of agencies you never even heard of. And the only ones I believe in electronically are those because I know them. And when they tell me something. So this whole Google search in the time, you can find as they have a ton of different witnesses that say it happened here and it happened there. It's not exact. Same thing with the black box with the car, when the 3-point turn was done and all these other things. The one piece of electronic that I actually trust is when John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi got her coming into the house.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi and the router and how they timestamp it is pretty basic, and it's not like a Google search or whatever like that. And that you can
connecting an
so when you look at her coming back into the Wi-Fi and having a timestamp on that router, was it 36 and she left, so they back it up, and you reconstruct it back from there. But again, all this electronic stuff, none of it is exact. And you have to weigh the experts that come in and talk to about it. And again, you look at the defense experts compared to the prosecution side, and it wasn't even close to a scale of who knew what.
Yeah.
The one police one didn't even understand that different apps can take timestamps from different other apps. Like how do you not back that up when you're doing your prosecution prep on your witnesses?
There's one wild card with experts that I really would like to see change for the better. I mean, I know, the U.S. attorney only authorized certain things to be given, which is understandable. I mean, they're doing something, and you would know this. Whatever is confidential or sources and methods and ongoing investigations, they're not going to dump that so the world can see it because of a state murder trial. But, now that the case gets tried several months later, perhaps there's other things they let go and can be used. And what I'd really like to see is if they let whoever for the FBI did their forensic cell phone evaluations testify for the defense, because I thought it got bogged down at the trial in terms of all three of the experts, the two for the DA and the one for the defense. It was a lot of gobbledygook, and I didn't think any of them had any real oomph, if you will, in what they were saying. And to be candid, I thought if any one of the three did, it was the Ian Whiffen guy from the Celebrate guy. And if they had access to the whoever did it for the feds, that would probably be a crusher. I mean, in terms of, this is why we believe that search is at 227, and they're not going to try to talk circles around, somebody who's essentially looking at terrorist phones and doing that kind of stuff at, high level stuff, and can really tell you, this is what the phone is. This is why we think that. And, just kind of bolster the defense's position, because I think that 227 search, although not critical to the defense, they have so much other evidence. It's one of those few facts where if they do convince the jury that they're right on that search, that's a crusher for the prosecution. They're cooked. They can't ever explain a 227 search.
Absolutely.
It's like the mechanical engineers, though, should have been the crusher.
Yep.
Again,
Listen,
that should be the end of the game. You know what?
thing-
I got a couple people in the green room who've been waiting. I want to bring them up too.
Yeah.
Nurse Kim, let's bring her up first. She's been waiting the longest. Nurse Kim, what's up tonight? You must be celebrating.
Oh, it's been a good day on TikTok, and it's been a good day on Twitter, because I realized that Attorney Mark Betterow has followed me. Okay, so
you're on TikTok too, Mr. Betterow.
No, I'm not on TikTok.
On Twitter.
Oh, on Twitter. You got to follow on Twitter.
My kids off TikTok, but no, I don't use. Yeah. So
Nice to see you guys. What a great conversation thus far. And I just was watching it in the back. I said, oh, look at Mr. Crawford's going to bring me out when he decides that I'm able to be here. I've been sitting here since 7:02.
A long time.
And just
I told you
like
7:30 though. I did say.
That's all right. I wanted to be early.
Yeah. You've been watching the whole time. You've been the longest. Like, I feel bad actually. Now you're making me feel bad.
I'm joking, Mike. I'm totally kidding. It's your show, and you have FBI agent Rob D'Amico. Is that how I say your last name, sir?
Yeah.
Wonderful. The incredible, unparalleled Mr. Mark Betterow. And Mike Crawford, I can't with your hair right now. Today you look like, what are we doing?
I don't have a hat on. I got new lights. I don't know.
It's incredible. You're just putting that money to work. You're putting it back in the studio, I see.
Now he knew the feds were coming on, so he didn't want to wear the
I gotta look good.
He cleaned up for the feds. I understand how this works.
Yeah,
we're just chopped liver, right?
The first time Attorney Betterow came out, I had like the beard, like it was.
Yeah.
You didn't like that.
I don't care.
You don't care.
Listen, I just wanted to ask one question, and then you can bring on whoever else you would like to. I will bid you gentlemen adieu. But I wanted to ask, what do we think about Judge Cannoni doing voir dires for all of the jurors? You think she'll have to, like, because of the motion filed today, she will have to bring all of them in? Or no, she will give the defense an opportunity to reach out to additional jurors and then move forward?
The latter. You need more evidence to warrant a hearing, and she's not going to grant a hearing because David Yannetti was told by an intermediary who was told by a juror that this happened. That's just not, that's not sufficient evidence. Now the Jackson affidavit is more affirmation, I should say. That's a direct conversation, but no, I think the appropriate thing would be to grant them the opportunity to develop evidence by speaking to jurors, getting affidavits or whatever. And if the jurors don't talk to them, then you're out of luck. You need to present evidence, but I think they ought to be given the opportunity to do that. And if warranted, then there'd be a hearing. And then I wouldn't even call it, I guess in Massachusetts, they like to call it a voir dire, but it would be a full-fledged hearing, and witnesses would testify. I think the jurors would have to testify. At least at this point, there's 4 of them who seem very interesting. The 3 who wrote or allegedly said what they did. And then the four person becomes fascinating, because the obvious question is, why didn't you check the box if you thought you acquitted her? And I can think of a reason why they wouldn't do that, but I'm sure the DA would also pounce upon that as proof that this is all nonsense, or not enough to sustain the burden that would have to be satisfied here. But not yet a hearing. They need more evidence, but they need the opportunity to do it. To deny them the opportunity would be outrageous. I mean, you potentially have a woman who is adamant that she's innocent, who may very well have been acquitted of murder, and the DA is chomping at the bit to retry her for murder. That is as un-American as it gets.
Absolutely. And I thought after that, when Norfolk DA came out and said, we can't wait to get back in, basically.
Their statement today was disgraceful. And
yeah.
They have very poor PR. All they should have said was, we've received the motion, we're reviewing it. These are serious allegations. We'll answer the motion and you'll get our response in court. The proper thing to say is not, we'll answer it and we can't wait to retry the case. I mean, this is why I call them zombies. They have no shame. You can't keep them down. They have no self-awareness. Any sane prosecutor, or at least a reasonable prosecutor, would at least be concerned that two lawyers submitted sworn statements under oath alleging that we believe one juror definitely told me this, and we believe there's solid evidence that two other ones did the same thing. The only substantive response, if they want to respond on substance, should have been, these are serious allegations, we'll look into it, and then we'll have more later. And you know what? Maybe some jurors come say it's not true, and then they can push back. But right now, the only evidence is that there is allegedly 3 jurors who said, you just hung us on 2 counts that we acquitted. And the DA sounds tone deaf, stupid, and just once again, no self-awareness.
I 100% agree. And I just wanted to ask one more question. I'm so sorry, Mr. Betterow, and to Mr. D'Amico. I just wanted to say, what is the reason, or have we seen other cases where a judge has received the note that the lawyers don't get to see the note that when it's sent up from the jury? So
caveat, again, don't practice in Massachusetts, but I was talking about this with Melanie Little earlier.
Sorry.
No, never in my life, in having a juror note, of which there have been many over the last 26 years now, I think. I have never seen a process where it works any way other than this. You're told there's a note. You come back in the courtroom. The jury is not there. And the judge says at, 3:33, whatever, we received a note from the, 4-person, and then they show you the note, and everybody looks at the note, and then the judge will read it into the record, what the note says, and say, we're going to bring the jury out. Anybody want to be heard on anything about how to respond or this is what I intend to do. Never in my life have I seen a note come out. The judge just looks at it and says, I'll read it to them, but I'm not going to show you or talk to you about it. Never.
Interesting.
That's very concerning, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
The only caveat is, again, I'm learning that they do things, a lot of
different
things.
We do a lot of things different here.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for me, guys. You can get me right off of this screen, and I wish you all a wonderful night. I'm hoping for everything to head in a positive direction. Having Trooper Proctor being, suspended without pay was the best possible outcome, or the most, not for him, but the most severe outcome for, what he has committed, not treason, but what he has done and what he has exhibited, and the internal investigation continues. So let's see where this goes. But for an indefinite amount of time and for the future, he's going to be just surfing the couch, and Lizzie's going to be getting a job.
Thank you so much, Nurse Kim. And you're on TikTok this week too, I bet.
Yep, we're on TikTok and we're on Twitter. So on TikTok, I'm just nurse_Kim. And on Twitter, I am KJRN 2510.
And are you doing any of the live shows that you do?
I did. We did one today, this afternoon at 5 o'clock, and we had 600 callers.
Wow.
600 we couldn't get to. Me and Dave only got to like 20. But it was the phone lines were jammed the whole entire time. It was incredible.
Awesome. I need to talk to Dave about his tech.
Call Dave.
How he handles the calls. Anytime we open the lines, it messes up my whole life after. So.
I know you have that Google. You have a Google problem. He's gonna figure it out for you.
I can't do it.
I love
Thank you so much, Nurse Kim. We'll be checking you out on TikTok. Thank you so much for being here.
Bye, guys.
Bye now.
Bye, Mr. Betterow.
She's fangirling you. She's all about Attorney Vedero.
Play that piano in the back, or is that for show?
We got Mazza Media. I'm going to bring him up in a second too. I got a couple of questions, a bunch of questions that are coming in. One for Rob, actually. They want to know about the head of the Boston office that like suddenly retired. He gave a retirement speech for Berkowitz and was basically there, and he's like friends with Morrissey, and then he retired. Joe Bavalaki or something like that. The head of. Did you know him? Do you know about him? Do you think it's suspicious that he retired?
No, guys retire from the Bureau because they get great job offers. So in the Bureau, and I told Director Comey this, like in the Bureau, you have to do your 20 years type of thing, and you're making a government salary, and you get to a point where you're in a position to eligible retire 50 years old up to 57. And then the job offers start coming in. And it's not like DOJ where you can go in and out of the Bureau. You can't leave the Bureau. You can, but it's frowned upon. So when those job offers start coming in and you get the one that you really want, that's what you jump at. You get this job offer. You're like, trust me, your wife's been bitching at you for like not making as much money as you can. Your kids are in college. Trust me, I have 4 that were all in college at the same time. And you take that job because that's the one you want, and the pay is that thing. So I don't suspect anything on his timing of his retirement. Everyone, like, again, the head of NFL security, she's always worried about the referee's call can be like, there's so much money on sports betting. Every referee called is going to be looked at like, oh, they're throwing it for the team, they're throwing it for this way. And unfortunately, that's the case nowadays. So people are pinning that. He retired quickly on that. Guarantee it was the right offer came at the right time.
Is that where he went? Did he go to like the NFL or something like that?
No, he went private sector, but
Private sector,
yeah. And
but those are the types of jobs that are available.
I'm actually in a company with him that he's also an advisor. So I want to put that out there. But it's one of those things. It's all about timing and a job offer. People will equate it to something else, but I don't think it's anything but that.
Excellent. Let's bring Mazza Media up now. He's been waiting. Mazza, what's going on today? You must.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm ready to go. It's been a great day. It's been awesome. The trolls were quiet for quite a long time because they didn't really have a response for this. They didn't know what they were going to do. But I've been saying for a long time that Judge Cannoni is the problem. She's the biggest problem, I should say, because she's the gatekeeper to this whole thing just ending. And we literally had a defense team that did a great job in court for 8 or 9 weeks there. And now it was a mistrial last week. And that's not the way it works. It's, each count or whatever is basically guilty or not guilty. And if she was not guilty on 2, and this is all over. So enough of this nonsense, enough of this thing going on today. And some people are saying this is unbelievable. I say it's very believable, because if anybody has followed this case for a long time knows that these kind of things have been going on. 3 jurors reach out to the defense team and are like, hey, this is what happened inside that, that jury, inside of jury deliberations. This is what we said. And now we have a judge that's basically just declaring it a mistrial all out. I got a question for Rob, who is finally a former FBI agent that we can trust, unlike another particular woman that probably doesn't appear to be too qualified in terms of ex-FBI.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Mazza. One FBI agent, former FBI agent, blocks me, and then Rob comes on the show. I mean, that's a difference right there, right?
Exactly. Because Rob's a legitimate FBI agent. That's why. And that's why I asked him this question. Can you just call up your buddies right now and say, hey, you just arrest a bunch of people that have been behind this whole thing so we can all just say, all right, today's the day? That'd be great. I'm just kidding. But that'd be great if that happened. Do you think that something like that would ever happen, though, hypothetically? I don't know if you can even answer, speak to a question like that.
All I can answer on that is like unbelievable to most people that the FBI takes its times on things and they're not going to rush to anything. It's become a national level case. It's one of those things that, like, if we can't prove it beyond a doubt, like, you're not going to see it. Like, it's got to come in strong. It's going to come in at the right level, what they can prove, what they can't prove. And we can't, like, I got hit on the other podcast about, like, aren't we going to investigate the judge? Well, the judge is, if it's an internal bias within her head, that's not a criminal thing you can prove. If someone is influencing her somehow and there's evidence of that, then you can investigate it. But if it's just their internal bias, that's not a crime you can prove. Like, you're going to look at all these different facts that are coming out. And I think you're looking at some civil rights things that if other cases have been like thrown for whatever reason, but you have to prove it. It's not just like, oh, I think this person's doing anything. So whatever comes in is going to be measured. Some people would be disappointed probably. But if you can't prove it in a court, you don't even want to name, like we learned from the Olympics, or was it 1996 with
Richard Jewell.
Richard
Jewell, where, and it wasn't even, it was a task force officer, and I don't want to blame it, but who leaked it to the media. And you look at a guy's life that was ruined because of that. And he really was trying to do it. Trust me, I look for Eric Rudolph for I don't know how many weeks in the mountains of Georgia and North Carolina. Yeah. But you look at a guy who really was trying to do the right thing, even though all the pointers were looking like, hey, this guy's personality and everything else. And that's why I kind of like with profilers. Profilers are good, but I did the DC sniper case. I was one of the snipers in a helicopter, and we were looking for a white van and a white guy in his mid-30s to 40s, and that's exactly opposite. And we bypassed what we should have been looking for based on evidence. So it's one of those things that we're very succinct because of all the things that have happened in the past, that they'll only come out with, this is what we know, this is what we're going to charge, so to speak.
Very more careful.
Yeah, you have to be. Like, again, you can ruin someone's life.
It's funny because we've said so much on this show that, like, we didn't feel like, especially with Attorney Betterow helping us, Mazza and I especially, but like that we did, like, I feel like, especially myself anyways, maybe I'm speaking for Mazza, but I felt like it was easy for me to say, she's just bad at her job. She's not corrupt. She's bad at her job. But after this stuff today, it gets harder and harder to defend her that she's just bad at her job.
Well,
correct.
I think maybe. I mean, the allegations here that the jurors meant to, or did in fact acquit, the fault right now would appear to be not trying to question and make sure the jury understood the task at hand, which was, you need to do this for each count. That may be being bad at your job. That doesn't necessarily translate to being corrupt. Being corrupt in this situation would be if she's talking to the jurors and they're saying, it was okay that you gave a hung jury because, we didn't agree on everything, right? And she's just like, thank you for your service, and keeps it to herself and then doesn't tell anyone. I'm not saying that's what happened, by the way. Let me be very clear. But that would be corrupt. I'm not ready to say, she could be biased. She clearly doesn't like the lawyers. I think that's obvious. That's just real life. That happens all the time, by the way, in litigation. She does not appear to like their client. That happens more than you can even imagine, believe me. Is that affecting some of the decisions that she's making? Hopefully not. But if it does, then you start, when actual bias creeps in and it leads to improper rulings, now you're tilting the needle towards what you're saying. But it may very well be that she just screwed the pooch on this thing with when they came back with the verdict, and it still doesn't make her corrupt. The real interesting question is going to be what happens if the defense does what I would do, which is to say, dear Judge Cannoni, you're on our witness list. So we need this case reassigned because we intend to question respectfully, Your Honor, about why you did what you did and what you told the jurors. And if she said you're not doing that, then it's on.
When someone's over their head in experience and knowledge, it may appear to be corrupt. And that goes along the entire gamut of law enforcement. When you don't know, I would always we had people high up in the bureau that just got up there within so many years and they didn't have the experience to be in the job. So they didn't know how to make those decisions properly, as I always said. It's not that they were corrupt as whatever. Yeah. It's that their knowledge wasn't a lot. They didn't have good experience. But when you look at judges and how they get there, and you look at this, did she even know that she was supposed to be able to do all these things? And the pressure of this case, I also think got to her. And again, is it a bias that she just didn't like if you look at the book Gladwell wrote about Blink and you get this, really quick impact if you like someone or don't. If she didn't like Karen Reed, I think there's an internal bias that's really hard to overcome. I always said, if I investigate someone I don't like, that I am absolutely going to make sure every decision I make is actually based on the facts, because I'm so conscious of over bias on the other side. Am I really looking at this? And that's like in the military, when I was working with JSOC, they always have people come in and they call route sell it. They have someone come in from the opposite side and look at everything that the one group's looking at and say, are we really looking at this properly? And it's one of those things that you get so biased because you're so involved in a case, it's hard to come out and look at it objectively.
There's Absolutely. A real wild card here too with her. Throughout this case, every time these lawyers have gotten fired up and they need to say their say, and I know how this works. You want to do it, and it is a publicity case, and there are times that they feel they really need to say something on behalf of their client. What does she do? She doesn't want to hear it and doesn't, there's no jury here. Stop. She mutes them. She doesn't want it to get out of hand. And then the worst part, though, is what happened maybe a week or so ago. She was humiliated on the issue that has directly led to the doomsday scenario that you're in today, which is she went at it with Jackson. Jackson was right the whole time. Okay. And she tried to give him the, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. This is how we do it. Enough. And then she tried to turn Yannetti by, bullying him into saying, you're from here. And why she thought he would go along with that, I'll never understand. He said, actually, Judge, no. And then she was clearly embarrassed. And that's when she yelled at Karen. But ultimately, what did she do? She went back, probably took a lot of humiliation, but changed the verdict form because it's not how you always do it in Massachusetts. And it turned out that Jackson was right.
Absolutely.
But now a week later, this has blown up into the worst case scenario because there are jurors who, it would appear, I don't want to say it's necessarily the case because we haven't heard any real evidence on this, but it would appear that if 3 jurors are saying we acquitted and the jury sheet does not have the box checked off, that there's a very reasonable argument to be made that that's because these people didn't know what the hell they were supposed to do, which is exactly part of the problem that had been raised a week earlier. And then you add into that none of this would have happened if the judge had just said, when you say hung, is that to all counts in some form or fashion, and she didn't.
Well, this isn't her first time being a judge, though. I mean, she's been a judge for what, 20, 30 years?
She's been a public defender.
She's not a rookie.
Yeah, she was a public defender. I mean, I think she's got enough court experience.
It would have happened in the way that this happened because, look, I don't believe she's stupid by any stretch of the imagination. I'm being serious now. And again, well, does that mean she's doing things? I'm not. I don't know. Maybe it's the pressure. I don't know.
Maybe it is the pressure. Maybe she just choked.
I don't know why it came out the way it came out. But what I do know is that when she was having the problem with Jackson over the verdict sheet, that many, or at least some of us lawyers were saying, this is a problem in case there's potentially a hung jury. We saw it from the Muppet seats, just like watching it in that. And I remember again, it was with Melanie when the verdict literally came out and she was going to declare it a hung jury, that we were literally saying on what, like, and then we ultimately just said, I guess it's on everything because nobody is saying a word, but this is really weird.
That's what we all assumed. We could, because
And-
we assumed the judge must know, because I mean, and she didn't even
is
let the
not-
defense speak. She didn't let the defense even make an argument. Like, it just,
And-
the whole thing is crazy.
And
You
the
don't
only
think that
thing,
she tried to prey on the ignorance of, like, Karen had a real great, if Karen didn't have the defense attorneys that she had, if they were less experienced, if they weren't as good as they were, less experienced defense attorneys may not have picked up on what was contested by them in regards to what was on that sheet, how that sheet was written and sent to the jury. You don't think that they were basically, I'm just asking devil's advocate here, you don't think that she was purposely being ignorant to try to see if she could put one over on the defense attorneys?
no, I think if anything, and it's complacency, you fall into a pattern. And most of the trials in that courthouse, I'm going to guess, are garden variety, boring for the public. It is what it is. And it's just the way, again, it is like Chinatown. It's just the way things are done. And you're right. Maybe the lesser attorneys don't complain, or if she challenges them, they fall in line, and you just, you take your eye off the ball, and it becomes, this is how we do things. So this is how we do things. And why is that? And the justification is because this is how we do things, and it takes on a life of its own. And then here comes the big guns with the big client. And, particularly when you get the big guns from out of town, okay? Because he doesn't care. I'm not here to make friends. And Yanetti's not there to make friends either. Believe me, you could see that he had more battles with her, I think, than anyone at defending his client vigorously. But when a guy like Jackson's coming from across the country, you really think he's worried about what she thinks of me? Or I have an innocent client who's getting screwed. Am I going to fight for them? And I think she probably screwed up. And look, when this came out today, she only did one thing. The only thing she did today was to basically make sure the jurors' names don't get out to the public. Now, you can say, well, does that matter? Not really. But the optics of that, as that's her response, as opposed to, let me call the parties in for a quick conference, even a phone conference, just to say, do we need to set a schedule? And does anybody want to be heard on whether I should release or allow them to contact the jurors, not their names? And by the way, you saw the defense. They didn't name the jurors. They were A, B, and C. No one's going to dox the jurors, or these are real lawyers. No one's going to do that. Not like the reporter who named the kids the other night, by the way. If you saw that, that was interesting. That's neither here nor there. But the only thing she did today was ensure that nobody knows who the jurors are, but had no comment on how does the defense get access, and the prosecution, frankly, get access to learn and acquire evidence on the most serious allegations that you could get. I mean, you're talking as constitutional right, Bill of Rights protection that you need as could possibly be. And this is going to drive her crazy.
We had some questions come in for Rob. They want to know if Higgins, as an ATF agent, is he subject to polygraphs? They also, another question came in about that. They want to know what you think about Higgins, his actions as an ATF agent.
Well, one, I don't think ATF do polygraphs. FBI, we do them to get in, and we do them every 5 years. Trust me, they're not fun, but we do them every 5 years for a reinvestigation.
Did you know a guy, Rob? I don't mean to interrupt you, but years ago I worked cases, and the polygraph guy we would use was like the old classic FBI polygraph guy. Did you know a guy? I think he might be deceased now, but a guy named Paul Miner as the polygraph guy. Did you know him?
I've heard the last name Miner, but I can't put a face to him.
I mean, he was old when I knew him, but he did all the like heavy stuff. And I just wonder if you ever came across.
So a friend of mine, a polygrapher, like out of the Boston office, Chris, he's a great guy, but polygraphs are one of those things that the Bureau uses. A lot of agencies don't. CIA uses them in a different way. Polygraphs can be beat, but I don't think they're polygraphed for any of their clearances or onboarding. But I just think there's some questionable things again with what he did and his process for going to the police department after, and some of these other things. They don't make sense at all, like not even close to making sense. And I think him presenting text to the investigators and saying, "Oh, here, look at the like." Again, it's one of those things. And in general, like if something happens, like something happened with my neighbor, and I'm like, "Hey, do you want any access?" I have like 6 cameras at my house. I'm like, "Do you want any access to my cameras? Like, how can I help make this right?" type of thing. And that's exactly what didn't happen in this case type of thing. So you look at it that way. I think there's some really questionable things that happen. And again, the Bureau and ATF aren't the best of friends. Date back to my time with Waco and everything else. But it's one of those things. You take it personally. You look at like, hey, what did this person do? Why does it not make sense? What are his actions saying in part to the investigation? And I have some very serious questions on
What
it.
do you make of the fact that when Higgins testified, and again, I know they're speaking in code about other proceedings in this, but there was clearly a point where people like you and I would know that they were establishing that Higgins's testimony was directly in contradiction to an FBI 302 that he had given interviews to FBI agents, and clearly they were at odds. And I would suggest on a material fact, it was related to scrubbing his phone and getting rid of it. So you have FBI agents, everybody knows he proffered, whatever. So there's these 302s of his interviews. Whatever happened to his phone is a key point of that discussion and a key point of this investigation. And Higgins testifies under oath to something totally different that he told the FBI as documented in a 302. How do you think the FBI and U.S. attorney are going to react to that?
I think they're going to look at it again. I think he also had some questionable things against the grand jury too, correct?
Yep.
On this.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
anytime you testify and it's under oath, then that goes to, so I think a case may be building on him for perjury, because if you say something under oath to the grand jury and you say something under oath to this court in this case, and then you told the FBI something that was documented in 302 and they are not the same, then you're looking at, again, lying to an FBI agent, lying to a grand jury, lying under oath. There's something in there that I think is going to come out. So you kind of let the guy dig his own grave to a point. Like you let him do it, and then you come out and say, okay, well, you testified this to the grand jury. You said this to an FBI agent under oath, and then you said this in a courtroom, and they are actually contrast to each other. I think you're going to have some problems.
Do you think they would 1001 him just based on the phone stuff if he told materially false information about what he did with his phone?
Yeah, I mean, normally you don't prosecute it. 1001 is lying to an FBI agent. So again, it's one of those things that very rarely prosecuted. But anytime I was an FBI agent and I was talking to somebody, I'd let them know that if you lie to me, it's a federal crime. It's 1001, and this is this is what you can face. So that again, they understand lying to me is a federal crime, so that they try to. So when you look at it though, but if it's significant, and I think, but Martha Stewart got,
she made the statute famous.
Yeah, she made the statute famous because we don't prosecute it a lot. Right. But in this case, I think if they caught him with that, I think they would look at prosecuting for 1001, because it would come out and be very obvious based on all his testimony and him sitting down and talking to an agent and lying to him if in fact that's what he did.
The technology, like how much training do you think like an average ATF agent gets on like things like cell phones and things like that, Rob?
I think that there's enough. Like again, like Cellbrite came in, and people have been asking about Cellbrite. We started using Cellbrite over in Iraq and Afghanistan for terrorist phones. It was one of those. It was a great tool, because I would go in and I'd Cellbrite a guy's phone and I'd get it, and then I would literally interrogate him based on the cell phone, and there's some crazy stuff on there. but you always have to look at, like, again, what's the training and what does the technology provide you? One case, technology is not as specific as people think it is. Like the Google search at 227. I had a case, someone was kidnapped in Kabul, Afghanistan, and what was happening was that we knew they threw their phone away. That's their standard thing. But on Messenger, he kept going green. The kidnapped victim kept going green, and the family was saying, "Hey, he's online," type of thing. And as I tried to go down a rabbit hole with tech folks, I ended up talking to someone at Facebook and saying, well, the last time you're online, Facebook wants to send you advertising. So they take the last IP you're on and they try to like ping you to come up and pay more attention to your messenger. And every time that happens, you go green. It doesn't mean the person's online. But it took me like 2.5 weeks to find someone to tell me why a kidnapped victim who I know's phone is probably thrown away, why they're going green, because the family is getting like, hey, he's online. So when you look at technology, it's not as specific as everyone thinks. Cellbrite will take information from the phone, and you have to have a really, truly, real good expert that is non-biased to look at it and say, well, this is what it's implying. But there are certain things that are exact. Like I said, I think the Wi-Fi of her coming back to John, to O'Keefe's house, a router noting when someone comes online is very specific, and it's really hard to do. A search on Google, I think, is more difficult because of all these different things. Though it's one of those, you can find someone to agree with you, so to speak. It gets really cumbersome. But it's like DNA in the early days. We maybe get to a point where it's more exact, but it's kind of tough right now to say exactly what happened when electronically, so to speak. And same thing with like John steps up and down the stairs. Like you have one person saying, well, it happened here, and then another person saying it happened there. I don't think like the jury's going to look at what expert do they believe the most based on. Like I was telling one podcast, when I testify to a jury, it's theater. If I'm talking to the jury about a process, I'm looking them directly in the eye and talking to them. If I'm accusing the subject of something, I want the jury to see me look at the subject directly in the eye and accuse him of him saying something or doing something, because I think that is important. Again, it's theater. I'm talking to the jury. I'm looking at them. If I'm accusing the subject, I'm looking directly at them because I want to see the jury. I'm not afraid to not look at the subject and say something. So it's one of those things, like as an expert gets up there, how the jury interprets everything he's doing based on his nonverbal, how he's interacting and everything else, that's who they're going to believe. Be it like, again, it's prejudice or not. That's how they look at things.
I'm believing the expert who says the Apple Watch is going up and down over the slight hill. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going with that nonsense.
But again, like, do you have the other support? Like, there's other things that add to it that lend credibility to it that you can say it. But again, if your expert says they didn't even know,
I wear this every day and I don't get credit for the hills.
Yeah, if you don't know that an app can take timestamps from 3 different other apps. Right. Then you really lend credibility to his testimony if he didn't know that. And a defense attorney who's not an electronic expert researched enough to figure it out and ask you. You go into the defense attorney humiliated most of the prosecution witnesses. I mean, it was embarrassing.
Yeah, especially Trooper Paul. What did you think about Trooper Paul, Rob?
I really did feel sorry for him. It's one of those things that, like, he went to the schools that he was sent to, and he did things, but when you look at it, even his testimony, like, he was embarrassed on it, but even his testimony didn't support the prosecution's claims. So again, it's like, even if you believed exactly what he said, it didn't go to exactly what they wanted to, which was, I just felt bad for him. I really did, because I understand where he's at. He went to the courses they sent him to. he didn't have a degree where he should have and stuff. Like you look at, and I don't want to like keep harping on the Bureau, but I would go over to our Office of Technology and I would be freaked out on these. Like some of the stuff I saw on TV, I'm like, oh, that doesn't happen. Then I would go meet some weird scientists we had. We had chemical engineers. We had a doctor in antenna theory. Like the people that we had over there were scary because you'd sit down and like, I didn't even know we did that. Like again, it's one of those things that, but we sought out and we have the ability to pay for truly the experts to do this stuff. That when we were in Afghanistan, they would take these electronics experts and they would figure out how the bomb makers make bombs based on capacitors and resistors, and they'd make a blueprint of a bomb maker. And then they'd figure out who that bomb maker taught by the basic electronic like fingerprint of this person, and then they trace it back. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like who? Like these people are
Trace
insane.
all the purchases.
Yeah, like those ARCA guys. Those ARCA guys are like that, aren't they?
It is, but again, you have to like at that. That's what's great about the federal agency level. Like we can afford to do that because of that. But you put Proctor up there, and I feel bad. He went to the courses he's supposed to, and he just got embarrassed because he did not have the ability to answer the questions of a, like you said, this is a top trial attorney, comes across the state. This court's not used to it. The judge isn't used to it, and these experts aren't used to it. He is prepared. And that's why I would mortgage my house if I ever got accused of something. Like I would put everything on the line because I want a guy like that to represent me, especially if I'm innocent.
So my take on Trooper Paul is similar, but slightly different. I almost feel sorry for him, but I can't quite get there for one reason. He seemed like a nice enough guy. He seemed embarrassed. He seemed sheepish. And I was there the day where he got tuned up in voir dire, even before he testified, and he got that look from hell from Jackson. That I mean, I remember that right in front of me. But I can't feel sorry for him because he knew he was no expert. He knew what he was talking was nonsense. And he still participated in a fiasco show trial, which I don't think was ever going to seriously result in her being convicted because I just can't see how it happened. But you don't know. And he could have given testimony, theoretically, that could have put an innocent woman in prison for the rest of his life. And he knew that he was just making stuff up because they wanted him to do it. And I can't, I want to feel sorry for the guy, but I got to be honest, he deserves what he gets with his reputation, his career. And it's a shame because he should have had more courage to say, I'm not qualified. I don't know. Even if I'm your accident reconstruction guy, I'm not going to say that he banged his head on the ground and then bounced 30 feet onto the lawn. I'm not going to say that the taillight put dimples in his arm and it was done by this. And not only that, he had to have known that the defense had the ARCA guys lined up, and I'm not going to tell you what you need to hear. So I can only say I almost feel sorry for that guy.
I feel the same
agree
way.
with you. I mean, it's moral courage to be able to stand up. I mean, it's like so tough. And I'm not defending.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
but it's
He's
so
in a tough
tough
spot
to do that, and you end up getting down this road where it's it's hard to go back on, and it's one of those things. But I get it. Like again, the whole thing. Like I would much rather a guilty person walk on the street than an innocent person be put in jail. And when you look at it that way, and that didn't come in the beginning of my law enforcement career at all. And you have to look at it, and I think it takes a lot of moral courage. I think it takes experience to look at it that way, and the burdens on law enforcement. And you need to get every credential you can to be able to stand up and say, I'm an expert in this, and this is why I believe this, and this happened.
Got another question for Rob, and I want to preface, just make sure we mention that the opposition side theory changed because Rachel Rollins at one point was the U.S. attorney, and they said that Rachel Rollins had a political issue with Morrissey, and that's why this started. And then when Rachel Rollins was out, they went to this. They basically said that there was a theory that Levy started this whole thing because Yannetti asked him to. What do you think about those like kind of theories that like the U.S. attorneys are just starting these investigations just, because of politics or because somebody asked them to?
I think there's some backstory, and when you get into anyone who's politically appointed, there's a difference between career prosecutors and someone who's appointed. If someone's a U.S. attorney and they're politically appointed, I always question things. I don't know. I do know there's a whole thing about like someone's wife and working for so-and-so and not working for him, that there's a backstory to it. I don't know enough to really say, but I always look at career prosecutors and politically appointed U.S. attorneys.
I mean, Rachel Rollins, the one they originally went after that one about, she was both. She started out actually before she got elected to anything. She was a assistant U.S. attorney, so she was a real attorney, really prosecuting. Then she became district attorney, and then she became the U.S. attorney. So she's kind of like a both. Like there's, I know what you're saying.
I look, Rachel Rollins, I think, is indefensible.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know
she's had problems.
I'm sorry, she's awful.
But Levy doesn't seem like, I don't know.
No, but the issue
all right.
you're talking about is the guy who is running the corruption unit, whose name is Dustin Chow, who ironically was at the Manhattan DA's office the same time I was a long time ago, although I don't know him that well. And I don't know if I probably know him if I walk by him, but I don't think I even had any real relationship with him. But apparently his wife used to be, I guess after they left New York and moved to Massachusetts, worked in the Norfolk DA's office and either left or got fired or something, bad taste in the mouth with the Morrissey DA's office. And so the theory of some of the rabble rousers is that this is a settle scores vendetta for the chief of the official corruption unit, ironically abusing his power and committing official corruption by going after, other prosecutors for no reason, when it turns out there appears to be a lot of good reason. But that's what they're trying to use to discredit him, is that somehow it's a personal vendetta for what they did to his wife, which I have no idea what any of that.
Basically, we've laid out three different stories. It's been Rollins, this Chow guy, and now Levy. It's always kind of the same story, but different people. You notice that?
The part that they leave out, which is most fascinating, is at one point Morrissey wrote a letter to OPR, which that's the Office of Professional Responsibility in DC. They're in charge of, they're like the ombudsman of, federal law enforcement people, FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. attorneys. If anyone's going to get in trouble internally, it goes to OPR. And they got a response in like 3 days or less, really stern response, basically saying, we've spoken to the, people in the District of Massachusetts, and we're quite comfortable with what they're doing, and your complaint is, go away, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. I mean, Morrissey complained to OPR to try to get the U.S. attorney in trouble, if that's the right word, or to get it transferred to another district or something. Did not go well.
Yeah, it's I don't know where they go now. Especially if it turns out that the two of the counts were not guilty. If this is true.
Well, that's a long way from being decided. That's right now it seems like it's got some life to it, but that will not happen anytime soon. That's going to be highly litigated. And you just don't know. But the reality is this, and somebody else said this earlier, and I had said this earlier as well somewhere else. If the murder case got tossed, and Rob, we agreed about this probably an hour ago, isn't that doing them a favor? If they're too dumb to see it on their own, if the court threw it out, it's actually doing them a favor. It would force them to focus and trim the fat, and be smarter. So it just, the optics of it look bad for them. And I think obviously if the public believes that Karen Reed was actually acquitted on 2 out of the 3, it puts more pressure on Morrissey. Why are you doing this? You had a terrible case. How did you not know this? The same day, Proctor is basically finished for all intents and purposes. If he ever testifies in this case, he's going to be a former state trooper. And, you know, the defense could still call him. You know, Buchanan is attached to him through these text messages, has his other problems. I mean, this thing is just getting by the day worse for the DA to retry.
I think if they threw that out and they looked at retrying, they're really going to try to get her to plea. I don't think they will. I think they'd like reduce it down to something that would be like unbelievably like low, just to get out of this without the disgrace of going to trial again and losing. I don't know how they go back to trial. I really don't.
I don't even know how they offer her a plea, for the simple reason, because we know she won't take it.
Yeah, she'll toss it in their face.
But well, that's what I mean. They'll make a public spectacle out of it and humiliate them. And I mean, I've seen situations where prosecutors actually are afraid when they overcharge or they indict a BOS, you know, a bag of whatever, that they can't get out of, and they try to throw a lifeline to the defense, and you know, you try to tell them you're not going to do it. I mean, one of the things, actually, this is very interesting.
The Commonwealth needs they need help at this point, because
this happened in Hirsch, actually, Mike. A year ago, they called and said, would she ever think about taking she's died for 18 felonies, facing mandatory state prison. Would she ever think about you know, a misdemeanor? And well, you know, you have to talk to the client, but I think, you know, I don't want to give you any, you know, misbeliefs, but most likely not. Say, are you offering? You know, no, just asking, you know, let me know if you think she would be interested, and then call us and let us know. And, you know, and I laughed and I said, you know, it's obvious why you're doing this. They're doing it because if they offer it, she's never taken it. She was innocent, and she got justice the way she deserved.
Thank God you didn't take that deal.
But of course, no, it was never even. I mean, you have to tell the client ethically, but you know, and like your FU.
Did she even think about it for a second?
No, absolutely not. But the point is, they don't make the offer officially because they're concerned you're going to run around and go public and say these jerks, not JURKS, but JERKS jerks.
Thank you for clarifying.
And do this, and you know, then basically know they're in trouble, but don't have the courage to dismiss it. And I think, to bring it back to Karen Reed, that's why they would never do that. I mean, look at the support she has. Look, I mean, if anything, she should feel more emboldened that you know that she's in good shape. You know, let's assume that for whatever reason the murder charges don't disappear, which they may, but you have jurors who are now publicly saying, we never took that seriously. Okay. We never took the leaving the scene seriously. How does that do anything other than embolden the defense to redouble their already like over aggressive, incredible efforts to do whatever it takes to win? I mean, their batteries are just going to be charged that much more.
And I don't even think they can get over when you look at it, like if they're going to get an expert witness to testify that the injuries came from a car accident, say, well, the defense is going to be like, well, you hired this person.
Yep.
Yeah.
My defense expert was hired by the FBI, a third party who had no like bias in this case. And they're saying this, but you found someone to say something else. So I don't even think like their expert witnesses can be overcome in a second trial because of everything that's gone on. So I think it's so tough.
Can you imagine that? They a prosecutor pays for an expert to attack the defense expert who was gift wrapped to them. Both sides had access to.
Amazing.
And then they established that the prosecution expert was hired in, you know, October 2024 for an incident that occurred in January of 2022. And, you know, obviously a second jury, if it is a jury trial, can understand why that would be, because it's for round two, because round one, you know, didn't work out well with expert testimony.
So it's getting late. we had Rob here for quite a while. What are your final thoughts, Mazda Media, first, quickly? We'll go through everyone and any final thoughts, and promote yourself too.
Yeah, sure. Mazda Media on YouTube and Mazda Media on X. And my honest thoughts are that this cover up and framing of Karen Reed is no bounds. It's everything we've long thought it to be. You had people on the other side try to say that we're just conspiracy theorists, that we're making up cover up stories of her being framed. It's all as real as we've always thought it is. It's from the word go. All the people in that were involved in this put it on her, did everything they could. It goes up to a very high level in this particular state. There's no question about it at all. And I just ultimately, the more things I see, the more like I said, I don't find this stuff unbelievable. I find this stuff very believable because it's par for the course of what we've seen for over a year now. Every single time in this particular story, or saga as I like to call it, crazy, unpredictable stuff just happens to happen. You got 3 jurors going to the defense today being like, hey, we were like 12-0 not guilty on 2 counts here. And, these are the kind of things that I'm like, well, there you go. I was sitting here this morning ready to write at noontime. My noontime tweet today was going to be, it's really weird that everything's so quiet today because there's no trial. It's just so quiet. Like I'm just sitting here working all day and there's nothing else, getting my interest at all. And all of a sudden, like 11 o'clock, I'm like, there we go. So I'm looking forward to the 22nd. Obviously, Michael Morrissey's looking forward to the 22nd after what he said today. He looks forward to addressing these new motions or what have you come the 22nd, which is an interesting comment to make. But the defense has got the Commonwealth up against the ropes right now. And they're basically Rocky Balboa in round 3 against Clubber Lang in the final fight, where he just goes absolutely off and ends that thing.
I love the movies. I love Clubber Lang going down. That was great.
Yeah,
after what he did to Apollo Creed. Come on.
Right. Yeah.
Payback.
Yeah.
So, Attorney Betterow, what are your final thoughts tonight?
I mean, it's very interesting. You're hearing from another really credentialed federal investigator. You heard some of the things that Rob did. Chasing Pirates, I thought was the coolest, by the way. But you made reference to these really high-level investigations, and I've spoken to a lot of law enforcement people like Rob, high-ranking NYPD people, other federal people, local people in Massachusetts, like retired or even existing cops. And, you hear some of these people who try to say, take off the tinfoil hat, and you just follow the evidence. And I think any sane person, when they first heard about this, would come in and say, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But then, you follow the breadcrumbs, like we talked about earlier, with the ARCA that leads to the taillight, that leads to Proctor, all that stuff. It all, the butt dials, and it all starts to make sense. And there's reason to be concerned here with the way the case was investigated, not just the competence of the investigators, but, the ethics in some of them. I mean, the only credible cop that I'm fully convinced of that testified in this case was the guy from Dighton, who just had no reason to do anything. And conveniently, he just happened to, support the defense. Not that he wanted to, because he's telling the truth. But the point is, there are many, many credible people who are involved in law enforcement and criminal type work, whether it's in a courtroom or investigating, who do not believe that this is crazy land because you think that somebody could be framed or certainly is actually innocent. And people just need to keep listening to these kinds of people, and more people should, because the more you think about it, the scarier it is, because it does appear to be the case. And that's, again, not wearing a tinfoil hat. And just, you top that off with what happened today. This is crazy. You're never going to see this ever again. You're never going to see a situation where jurors are saying, what are you talking about? I voted not guilty, and we all agreed. And the more you learn and the more you hear, the dirtier the case sounds, the more unjust it sounds. And you just hope that for some reason, whether it's natural, meaning the DA wakes up and smells the coffee, or if it's unnatural, meaning, the feds dropped the nuclear bomb on the whole thing, that this ends without a retrial. Because I think it would be horrible for somebody who's innocent to be put through this again and again, with their family to have to endure this emotionally, financially, reputationally. So hopefully at one point, Morrissey will just wake up and smell the coffee. And if not, then the feds will introduce him to something stronger. We'll see.
Hope so.
Time to make the donuts.
Yeah, time to make the donuts. Rob, I got a question for you before I let you do your final thoughts too. You are the chief of operations Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems. There's like all this UAP stuff happening, like
UAP.
UFO. Did you ever have any UFO stuff happening? Did you ever touch any of that
we
stuff?
weren't into UFOs. We're into drones and
Okay.
people flying drones over Super Bowls and World Series and everything else. So
Yeah.
No UFO
UFO
stuff. I was waiting for you to say, yeah, we found some aliens. Oh, I don't know. You never know.
Yeah.
But what are your final thoughts tonight on this Karen Reed stuff and what's going on here?
It's like, again, I think cases like this coming to national attention literally help. Like you have to expose things like this. And at first, when I first got contacted by the other podcast, and I started looking into it and started researching it, I'm not a conspiracy guy. Like I'm not a big conspiracy, like, because I know the government, like, we're not coordinated enough to do some of the crap that people say we are, like, and keeping secrets and everything else. But when you start looking at it, and then you start looking at like how the witnesses testified and what they were like, again, the butt dials back and forth, it doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, then why? You have to critically look at it. And as I talked about earlier, like, you can't just go into, I'm a cop and all cops are right and I'm in this corner, because that's not critical thinking. Like, you have to look at it. And if you don't think injustice has been done in the justice system, you're way wrong. And thank God she's gotten an attorney that can come in and do what they did, because that's what I would want. Like, again, like I always tell people, I'm like, oh, you talk to cops without a lawyer? Are you crazy? Like, I mean, seriously, are you nuts? Because we're there to do one thing, So it's one of those back and forth. But when you start looking at the case itself, and again, even if you don't believe the conspiracy of what happened, but we didn't even get into like the dog being gotten rid of, the floor being changed, and the house being sold, and the phones being like thrown away.
So weird.
But even if you get into just an investigation, guys, gals, everybody, if you are put on trial and the case is that badly investigated, do you want to be on the other side of going to jail for something you didn't do? But again, the burden is all on the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did what you're saying. And as hard as it is, but you look at people who have now that getting out of prison after like 50 years of a trial that DNA proved that they didn't do.
Yeah.
Imagine being in prison any more than a day for something you didn't do, and the horrors of that. And I get it. Like anything happened to my kids, well, like there's some shit gonna go down.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you see both sides of it. Like, what do we do to fix that?
Both sides. Like, but
how do we fix the system, Rob? Because you've been in it. Like, how do we fix that? Like, we want to protect people from vicious criminals, but we also don't want to throw people in jail. I mean, there was a case here in Boston.
We have a good justice system, and we have the right people on the sides, and every once in a while, like, each side gets it wrong. And you have to, like I always say, like, you have to have a really good after action as you do things and look at things. It's tough. It is really so tough. And the country's drawn, like, you look at things, initial impressions of, this is my opinion and I'm sticking to it, instead of that open mind. And the jury, I think, like, literally, if they came back and said, second degree murder's out, absolutely. And then they looked at the other one and said, that's out. and then they deadlocked on another one. I think the jury did a good job at that point because some of them may believe more than another side. I couldn't have convicted on any of them. And I really think some weird stuff happened, and it goes out there. I think our jury or justice system is good. It can get better. You always have to be very critical of it. The really good units that do things are very self-critical. Like some of the missions that JSOC guys I've been on, they could do an op that went really well, and they're just hammering each other on what they did wrong. And the mission still came out good, but they're so precise in what they do, they're willing to self-criticize on even if it went right. And you have to be that way. And I think you look at this one, I don't know how they can go back and do it. I know I'm rambling to a point. It's one of those things that I'm glad it came out because you got to get your dirty laundry out there. You really do. You have to look at it and you have to say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And get the egos out, because I think there's a lot of egos involved in this one.
Great point. I think there's egos just for if we believe, let's say, the conspiracy, I think there was egos there too. There's so many egos. That was a good way to end. Thank you so much, Rob D'Amico, former FBI agent. Say your website again so people can find you.
Sir1consulting.com.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Attorney Betero Law. You can find him and Mazza Media. He's on Twitter and YouTube. Thank you so much, all three, for being here. And Nurse Kim earlier, too. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm going to finish off here by just reading off a couple of Venmos. We get a couple of Venmos come in. I want to thank, again, Attorney Betero, and I want to thank Rob D'Amico, Mazza Media, Nurse Kim for being here tonight, and all of you who are watching and all your comments. We had a donation come in from Meadow, $3, and Meadow said, "Shout out my name. My name is Meadow." I like that. Like my name is Slim Shady. My name is Meadow. My name is Meadow. I just shouted it out. Thank you so much, Meadow. Deborah sent $20. She said, "Can we discuss the new attorney they just hired?" I think we did. I think we did discuss that. I know we did. Attorney Betero definitely did. So Betero covered us on that. I'm going to check out a couple Cash Apps. I think, I'm not sure. Did any Cash Apps come in? Let me check. Thought I saw one. Yeah. Well, actually, this was from the other night. Mike Bradford, he's one of the Canton 9, sent a comment the other night. Don't know if I read it. He said, "How long can Commonwealth hold charges over us, the Canton 9? I keep forgetting to ask that one. How didn't I ask that tonight to Betero? We were caught up in other things. I will definitely ask that question, Mike Bradford. I'm not sure he might even know because Massachusetts isn't New York, but we will ask that question. I wouldn't get too caught up on this one. Lorraine just posted this comment. The facts is, it looks like on the most two serious charges, it was unanimous, not guilty. If that's true, that is a good thing. That's what we got to focus on. There was a protest. About 100 people showed up today, protesting at the Mass State Police South Boston barracks to have Michael Proctor fired. And looks like that's well on the way. He was suspended today without pay. He's not going to be paid anymore. If my advice to Michael Proctor is go to Levy and go talk to Levy right now, because I think that's your only out here, buddy. I want to thank April Sings. She gifted 5 Young Jerks memberships tonight. Thank you so much. Dreamer Thinker said, "Rob, do you think the DA is involved in the cover-up?" I don't think he did. I don't know if we asked that question tonight. Thank you so much, Dreamer Thinker. Just posting up I'm making sure all the super chats get on the screen. People get mad at me if I don't post them all. I try to post them out throughout the show. So I'm just going to post them all right now and answer anything that we didn't get to answer. If there are issues, if the juries felt bullied? There could be. That could be an issue. I don't think we asked that tonight. That's a good question, Reality Check. Definitely could be. it just, a lot of this stuff is like Attorney Vedero said tonight, like, can it be proven? So there's been some allegations. Can they be proven? We don't know. All of it could be an issue. It could be appealable. Will there be a hearing? It looks like that's what's next. There will be a hearing about this stuff. So I'll take it one step at a time. And I know that it's easy for us to all think, but Judge Beverly Cannoni is corrupt, obviously. But the most logical answer is she's just bad at her job. And I think that Rob and Attorney Vedero made some good points on that tonight. Just maybe doesn't have the experience. I don't know. Maybe she just choked. She's too full of herself. She's too worried about what people think. I don't know. There's a lot of issues there. This was a funny comment. Mazza basically made the same comment tonight. It was hilarious. He's like, can you just help us out? Can you just raid them? Just lock them up. I don't think Rob has that power. It's very nice of him to come on tonight. He did a good job. Pizza is great. Why are people not more upset that multiple jurors reportedly voted Karen guilty on charge number 2? I think the reason is, people split the verdict sometimes. And let's put it this way. Most people always believe the police. So the fact that they might have found not guilty on the 2 serious charges, that's what we should actually be focusing on. And realizing that even if they did a retrial, if it turns out that, on that 3rd charge, and if that was the sole charge, maybe it wouldn't go that way. So I wouldn't get too caught up. I wouldn't get too upset about it. I would be I'm happy with the jury, honestly. Not happy they went that way, but I'm happy that they seem to have got it on the 2 most serious charges. Yeah, off topic. But hats off to Mr. D'Amico for being able to afford putting 4 kids through college. I know, right? Especially now. Just keeps getting more and more expensive out there for young people. It's really tough. And their parents. Oh, Miss Shorty. She says the ladies are what they like my background now. I took off the hat. I got a haircut. Is that it? No. I think Baz is still the heartthrob. And you saw how Nurse Kim acted tonight. It's like he was a rock star. Here's one about Tom Kelleher. Yeah, I know. I don't know why we haven't heard from Tom Kelleher. I actually was, like I said, I've said this a few times on the show. I knew Tommy Kelleher growing up. Bridgewater State College. We both went to the same college. He played football. I was a wrestler. My roommate played football. So they were both centers, I believe. So I knew Tommy. I don't know why he didn't come out. I don't know. I liked him. I thought he was a good guy growing up. When we were like, 19, 20. This question always comes up. Does the FBI sit in any of the trial, seeing they investigate? They don't have to sit there. All they have to do is watch it at home. And we kind of did discuss that tonight. They're watching. Of course they're watching. They don't even need to go there. They can just do what everyone else does. Watch it at home. And we did discuss this one tonight. Judge Bev, yeah, she may be a witness. This is why she may be recused from her own case. Thank you so much, True Crime Kangaroo. Thank you, Lissa. We did ask this question tonight. Great question. Thank you, Lissa. Sage Henning. We should have asked this one. I didn't get around to that one. Thank you so much for the question. Andrea Markowitz, thank you for the question tonight. Oh, the comment. Judge Bev wrote the response. Please look it up. Which response? Did it just come out, the response to the request? I guess she must have. We'll look that up. How does Higgins admitted use of FBI technology affect potential retrial and appeal? I don't know. No idea. What are the chances Bev is lawyering up right now? She might be. She might be. All right. I think I got most of these up. Just making sure I get everyone up because I don't want anyone getting mad at me. We do our best here. All right. I want to thank our mods tonight. MJ, Jen, Miss Shorty, Stephanie. Thank you so much for moderating our chat tonight. And I want to thank you all for watching, all the super chats that came in. I got a message on Facebook. I will check it out. All right. I think I got them all up. You know what? Before I leave, I want all the people watching in the chat. I'm going to have a poll right now. This is about my new lighting system here. I got a new camera and the camera didn't work. I don't have the right cord. So I'm probably going to set that up soon. I was hoping to set that up, but I got new lighting in here and I want to know if you like it better this way or if you like it better. Hold on one second. Or if you like it this way. So this is the 2. We'll call this the 2. This is the brighter look. Do you like it better this way, the 2 look, or do you like the 1? If you like 1 better, this is 1. If you like the darker look. So I want you to put in the chat right now if you like it 1 or 2 better. You like the lighter, or you could say light or dark. Which do you like? It's split. Everyone's good. No, you're like me. You can't decide. Some people like 2. A lot of people do like the 1. Light looks amazing. You like the darker? So you know I'm getting confused. Just put whether you like the darker look, which this is the darker look right now, or if you like the lighter. I can't decide, honestly. I like them both. Yeah, you like them both too. It shows me much better. So, you know what? It's since it's so split. You know what we're gonna do? We on the next show we'll do a poll. We will do a poll because you guys can't decide, and it's so closely split. I want to get a poll on this. Which you like, the darker or the lighter? I think darker is actually winning. 1 in day, 2 at night. Ah, that's a good point. Maybe. Yeah, switch night to night. Yeah, I think we're gonna do a poll on this. The important stuff. Do you see what I asked Betero if he might be here? You're like, I don't care. I haven't cared for the longest time either, but it's you guys made me care more about things like the looks of the show. Yeah, mix it up. You guys have cared so much. I have had to care about this stuff now. I want to thank you, all of you, for supporting and watching. This has been a wild trip. We're going to continue the show. Who knows where we're going to go next? I want to thank the guests for being here tonight again. And someone said, without the hat, my girlfriend's been saying that for months. I just need a haircut. My hair grows out so damn quickly. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye now.